I have a weird sense of starting things.
Well, thanks for breaking the podcast virginity.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have a couple seconds of silence and then I'll start. That way I can edit it.
Yeah. That's always the worst part.
Hi, I'm Raine Raine, CEO and founder of NerdNest, and my guest for today is Hayden Cox.
Hi.
And he is a Game of Thrones enthusiast. And tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
So there's been a lot of recent news in the Game of Thrones world, specifically the TV show. Not so much in the book, because George R. R. Martin's the worst and doesn't like to let anyone know that the book's coming out. They are announcing a lot of the casting rumors, and well, they aren't announcing the casting rumors, but there's a lot of rumors about who they're casting, because all the casting calls have been come out for certain characters without naming any names. It's been really, so recently the most important one I think people mentioned was Ian McShane, who's a really amazing actor, but they haven't mentioned at all what his role's going to be, and there's so much speculation on who he's going to be. There's also, I forget his name, but they cast someone who actually they specifically mentioned who they're going to play, which is the Three-Eyed Raven, which you remember from season 4 when Bran is in the up in the north in the under the tree, the weird old crumbly man in the vines is that they recast him, and I think he's going to play a much larger role, which is a good sign because that means Bran is coming back.
So why do you think he was absent for this past season?
Well, I mean, from a book reader,
Yes.
the end of book 5, which is the last book that came out, is the end of what happened with Bran in season 4. So we're moving ahead with Bran's storyline where no one actually knows what's going on.
Okay.
Which I think is going to be really interesting, and I have my worries just because I'm a book reader, and of course I want to read the book first, but I'm interested to see what happens with Bran's storyline because he, from what what you learn in the book and what you've seen in the show, he might be a really important character to learn about a lot of stuff that happened maybe before everything happened, before the show started, because this is another important casting thing. The fact that they're talking about the Three-Eyed Raven means that Bran is going to be going into training, and if you can remember things from past seasons, there's the important thing that he's a warg, but also that he has other per se powers, like a green seer, which is, if you remember Jojen, who died in season 4 at the end, he had the power to see in the future and see in the past. He's green seer per se, and apparently Bran also has that ability, but he hasn't tapped into it yet, and that brings to other casting. It's like a huge nest of rumor and everything, so it's really confusing. There's a casting for a specific. All the character casting says is a legendary fighter, and that brings into possibilities of it being maybe Rhaegar Targaryen, or more specifically what every webpage, every blog is saying is it's going to be Arthur Dayne, who is Rhaegar Targaryen's closest friend.
So we'll be seeing some flashbacks, you think?
Most likely there's going to be a lot of flashbacks this season, which I think they kind of need to do if they want to go ahead with that the specific sort of possible twist where the whole Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark having Jon Snow as their child, which is a huge rumor, and they kind of mentioned the whole Rhaegar and Lyanna storyline this past season by Littlefinger sort of mentioning it down in the crypts in Winterfell. So I think what they're doing is it's a huge idea that that's true. A lot of readers, a lot of people who watch the show have the idea that Jon Snow is actually Rhaegar Targaryen's son, but it hasn't been proved in the books, hasn't been proved in the TV show. But again, we're going into a season where most of it's going to be something that both book readers and television watchers don't know anything about. So that's why there's so much speculation.
Okay, so say that Jon Snow is their child. What does that mean for Jon Snow? My
main question with the whole, we find out that Jon Snow is the son of Rhaegar. When is Jon going to figure that out? Because what I was saying, so with Bran, the fact that he can see into the past, he might be able to see into the past and see the storyline with Rhaegar and Lyanna and Arthur Dayne, which is his closest friend, is Rhaegar's closest friend, and might be able to figure that out. But when are we gonna get Bran to Jon? Also, is Jon still alive? Which is a huge, after the end of that season, I'm a huge believer that he is still alive. or he's going to be alive, because without any spoilers, which I don't think there will be, at the end of the fifth book, it's pretty much the same ending as the show with Jon, but it's a little less gruesome. All you hear is like he feels a sharp pain in his back or something along those lines. Like it alludes to the fact that he was stabbed.
Less heartbreaking.
Less heartbreaking. You're like, it's more, you get angry because you're like, wait, what? Rather than in the show where you're like, oh my God, Jon, you're dead. So we're on the same boat of like, is Jon gonna come back alive? Luckily, I think the show made it seem like he's gonna come back alive because Melisandre just happened to come like right on time back to the wall right before he dies.
Perfect timing.
And we all know Melisandre is crazy. And if you remember how I think Melisandre is going to be the one to raise him from his grave. And so she's a Red Priest, and if you remember, this is like going back a couple seasons, but Beric Dondarrion, that one character that you remember Arya interacts with, where he's resurrected.
Yeah,
Thoros of Myr is a Red Priest who's the one who brings him back to life. So I assume that Thoros is kind of like a lower level Red Priest, because he's kind of like, I've been doing this for like a while, but he's not like as devout as Melisandre. I assume Melisandre should be able to bring Jon back to life. So I'm hoping, because it would suck because they're doing all these casting news of things that would lead to us finding out that Jon is Rhaegar's son, but if Jon actually died, there'd be no point to it, which would be really sad.
That would be really sad.
It'd be really sad. So,
but it wouldn't be the first time Game of Thrones has broken our hearts.
True. I mean, killing Robb Stark, that was the worst.
That was pretty brutal.
Everything. But so it's really interesting seeing like where they're going forward, and like it scares me because I'm a book reader and a show watcher, but like I don't know. Like it's like I'm going into this empty abyss where like I love the book so much, and I really hope George R. R. Martin announces something about the book coming out before the show, because he said recently that he's like, I'm going to try really hard to get the book out before the show, but
who knows, right?
Who knows, because George, the first book came out in 1995, the most recent book came out in 2011, and there was like a 6-year spread between book 4 and book 5, and those books actually happen in the same time chronologically. So it was like, you get like some snippets of what happens with other people's storylines in the 4th book, and then you get the 5th book, and there's like this just endless long time where you're like, wait, are things happening with all the other characters? It was stressful. George R. R. Martin like hates, like, you hate him, but you love him because he does this to you all the time.
Yeah, so I know that George R. R. Martin has revealed the final grand finale to the show's producers. Mm-hmm. How much more do you think he's revealed as far as making this upcoming season and sticking to what the books will be?
I have the feeling that with the show and the book, I feel like George R. R. Martin actually might not fully know how he's going to get to the end game yet. Because like that's a lot to figure out. And he has 2 more books that are most likely going to be 1,500 pages each. Like, that's hefty material. And I don't think he could add any more characters. Like, there's so much going on already. They know the end game, but I think the book and the show might go about it different ways. There's probably some key plot points, like maybe the Rhaegar, Lyanna, Jon scenario that he's revealed to them that will happen in the show and like aren't like the end game of the book, but they like happen in the same thing. But I think the show's gonna have the same end game as the book, but it's just gonna get there different ways.
Do you think the show will take into account more of what fans want to see, since their fandom has such a huge influence into the show?
I think they definitely have, but I feel like they've done it by like making us more angry. Because there's some characters that they've killed off and I've been like, why? Like that's one of my favorite characters, like Baratheon Selmy, that they killed off this season. I was like, why? Why do you have to kill him off? He's so cool. He kills everyone. He's like the strongest fighter in the world, according to lore. But like, I don't know. I think they're definitely gonna start moving it towards what show watchers want to see, and like Jon Snow coming back to life. Everyone wants to see that happen because no one wanted to see Jon Snow die. Like that was probably the most devastating thing for people who had no idea that was going to happen. They were like, no, Jon Snow, no, and everyone loves Jon Snow. So I feel like they're going to have to bring him back to life because the fans want it. So I feel like they are probably going to move in a more direction where they do what the fans want, but also Game of Thrones is notorious for doing some crazy shit that they're going to just explode and like everyone's going to be like, I didn't see that happening, what's going on, like, so I think they want to keep people on their toes. They're all about the shock factor. They're all about not wanting people to know what's going on. Like they're keeping so many things under wraps, especially with casting. Like the descriptions are very vague and there's no title, and then like people are left to speculate who that's going to be. And like I think they're going to play to the fans. Like they know what they want to do with the fans, but not all of it's going to be good. It's just going to be shocking.
So maybe play with the fans more than play to them.
Yeah, definitely play with the fans, which is going to be, I'm, again, so excited to see, and it'll be interesting, because this season had some very mixed reviews, because this was most seasons had been close to the books, like, generally, but this is one where, like, a lot of things were different. And, like, a lot of book readers, including myself, were a little frustrated on certain things, but, for the most part, like, the season had good reviews, but there was definitely some, like, controversy about a few deaths, a few scenes, especially with the huge, like, Sansa moment that everyone had a huge freak out about, which I agree was, like, not appropriate to put in, but, I mean, it'll be interesting, because who knows what's gonna, I'm in shock with, like, the last season, because now, as, like, a person who read the books and everything, it's crazy, I can't handle it sometimes.
I think that's a pretty fair reaction.
Yeah,
most people are on that page, whether you read the books or didn't.
Mm-hmm. And they always end with this giant. I think this was the first season they ended with like a really giant cliffhanger, because they ended with Jon Snow in the snow, like with blood and everything. When like past seasons has always been the 9th episode. That was like
that penultimate episode would just.
Because like the season before, you just like see Arya going off on a boat and Tyrion going off on a boat, and like that's sort of like. It wasn't really a cliffhanger. It's like they had somewhat of a conclusion to their stories for the next section of their story. But this one, it was like so many things are left unanswered, which I think is they've needed to start doing that, because people have not really enjoyed the season finales of most Game of Thrones seasons because there's like nothing. There's nothing. Everything's like, okay, well, on to the next season. Not like, oh my god, I need the next season right now. Like, I need to know what happened, so. And
I think after the mixed reviews, like you said, of this past
that
season.
That was much needed. It was much needed, because, like, people are gonna. I think it was definitely a good play by the writers, because I think they might have noticed that it was like, maybe this is weird. And especially, I mean, it was the last couple episodes that really, like, made the season the most interesting. Like, with the episode with the White Walkers, which was amazing.
It was stunning.
One of the best scenes I think Game of Thrones has ever produced, and like that didn't even happen in the book, but it's alluded to in a way. So they talk about Hearthome, and like there's like an allusion to like a devastating attack that happened on Hearthome, which was like so cool to actually see that come to life, and like now I want to see what happened there actually happen in the book somewhere else, because like I could imagine George R. R. Martin writing that and like it being some like amazing chapter on that whole thing. So it's amazing. Like I love that scene. It was like the best scene from the season, I have to say.
There was some really solid acting in that scene as well. Despite it being more of an action scene, I felt like even though they had some characters that were cast just for that one episode, they did a solid job.
It was the wildling woman. I saw a meme, of course, because everyone makes memes about everything, being like falling in love with like one of the best characters ever, killed off in the like first 10 minutes you see her, like, because she was so cool, and like it was such a sad scene too, when she sees all the children like that have now turned into these White Walkers, and she's like, I can't, like, this is so horrifying, which plays to the idea like this show, it's more than just like a medieval show. Like they add a lot of emotion, a lot of really like magical things which haven't really been added early in the, like, we know, like, some, like, dragons, like, creatures, but we don't get a lot of, like, magic, which I find really interesting that we're now delving into that with, like, Melisandre and, like, these, like, White Walkers. And there's a specific scene I remember from seasons past that I never remember myself thinking about. But it's the first time we see just the White Walkers alone, and it's this huge icy, like, cavern. Do you remember this?
Yes.
It's a really weird scene, and, like, it came out of nowhere, and no one really knew why it happened. But obviously, we now know with that, the White Walker attack. But you see the baby, the White Walker bring the baby to the...
Just the touch.
And just the touch. And that was, like, chilling. Like, that... The White Walkers are scary.
They are.
You're like, wow, there's zombies in medieval time, but they're ice zombies, and they're there to kill your children.
I don't think we really realized just how scary ice zombies can be until this was just brought to the forefront.
When you see them, they're falling off the cliff, and they're like, oh, what is the avalanche? No, it's human, like, White Walkers here to kill you.
I think that's another interesting thing with the baby is that Game of Thrones, I think, has had a very deep emotional impact on a lot of people, and there's been a lot of... not revulsion, but like people taking a step back because they've never been afraid of putting children into those scary situations.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's because they're staying true to the book. Because like the book has no like limits. Like George writes some really gruesome, like really devastating things. Like he is very articulate in how he describes it, and it's almost horrifying sometimes. Like I mean, of course, sometimes. When you're putting it into like a large-based network like HBO and people, it's getting really popular and people are watching it. It's so shocking when you're taking this George R. R. Martin's book where rape, plunder, murder, children being killed, like all this stuff is happening, and putting it into an easier source for people to see because most people are gonna watch the show over reading the book, which is fine, obviously.
You had a moment.
I know. I was like. But it's scary, and that's kind of what the shock factor is like. But it's I'm glad that they're like being true to it. It's just sometimes you always like step over one little boundary, and then like people vow to never watch the show again, and like they've definitely crossed that line a couple times, and people usually get over it and keep watching. But like they have caused a lot of controversy because of certain things, which is always like you don't want that to happen because you want to keep watching the show, but then you're like, oh no, like that was really crazy and not good. So
it walks that line.
It definitely walks the line, which is very interesting, and especially with children.
Yeah.
Because like when you think in the books, like Daenerys is actually like 13 when you first see her, so she's about like 16 now, 13, 14, 15. And you're like, wow, she's been married, she's almost had a child, she has been lit on fire, she has dragons, and she's younger than I am. And she's now currently alone in the grasslands with the end of the season, alone in the grasslands with the Dothraki, a very savage, like, rape-heavy company, and you're like, wait, you're like 15. Oh. And I think that's, like, it's something you forget, especially when you're watching the show, because obviously they cast people that are older, which I think is very appropriate and smart. But, like, they're actually meant to be that young. They're meant to be very young. Like, Arya is, like, 10 years old, 9 years old. Like, now, in the books. She's very, very young. And Sansa is sort of the same age as Daenerys in that realm. And, like, people are going... Because the lifespan is when you think it's medieval times, the lifespan's really short. So, like, people are put into things so early. And it's crazy with that. You never really know, yeah.
I guess that's a pretty good way to sum up Game of Thrones. You never
You're
really know.
You're never really going to know. Never.
Well, that's all the time that we have, but thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll have Hayden back soon.
Yeah, be sure to check all the casting news because it's really exciting.